I have my weaknesses as a game master, but until recently I was pretty sure I had one thing on lock: making my players feel like the heroes of the story. Then I read this book. It's called The Game Master's Handbook of Proactive Role-Playing. Within the first few pages of the introduction, I realized I had been missing something really obvious, something that would make the game more satisfying for players and easier for me. And despite how obvious this strategy seems once you hear about it, most game masters, at least for D&D, aren't doing it. I know this sounds like an infomercial, but this video is not sponsored and I don't get paid when people buy this book. I did write the foreword and I agreed to do that because when I read through the advanced copy, it completely revolutionized the way that I think about running games. I actually have a project coming out later this year from this publisher, and I wish it were half as genius as this book. Here's the basic idea. In the classic stories that our games are inspired by, heroes are reactive. The bad guy does something, the good guy has to stop him. This is the way most D&D games are structured. The dungeon master presents a problem in the form of a plot hook, and the players respond to it. A dragon is attacking the city, so the players need to stop it. A lich is killing villagers to feed their soul jar, and the players need to stop it. The king has been corrupted by demonic influence, and you get the idea. Check out any published adventure, and what it's providing to you is a problem that the players need to solve. In Curse of Strahd, the villain traps the party, and they need to defeat him and escape. In The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, 3 hags have trapped an archfey, and the party needs to defeat them and free her. In a standard D&D adventure, the players are basically told what their goals are. They can have their own more personal goals, but those are always going to be subplots. Now, this isn't inherently a problem. You can run some great games where evil is proactive and good is reactive. I think we've all done that. But the authors of this book, Jonah and Tristan Fischel, point out 3 problems with this reactive playstyle. First, it is so much work for the game master. It's often said that D&D in particular puts a lot of responsibility and labor on the game master's shoulders, and a big part of this is that the GM is not just responsible for the mechanics of prep, balancing encounters, fleshing out NPCs, choosing loot, but they are also responsible for basically creating the plot. It's the GM's job to invent a villain, decide what that villain is doing and why, ensuring that this lines up with the player's interests, show the players what the villain is doing in a way that compels them to intervene, and then repeat that process all over again every time the party stops them. I made a video recently about the extremely common feeling amongst game masters that they just care about the game more than players do, and I think this is a huge part of why that happens. As the authors write, relying on the game master to drive the entire game fosters bad habits in players. They start to assume the story will come to them, that the GM will always present them with something to react to. Also, I don't know about you, but I feel a tremendous amount of pressure to always have something for the party to do. One of my biggest anxieties when running a game is that the players will move too quickly and I will run out of content for them, or that I'll offer up a plot hook that the party just isn't interested in. But that is only a problem in a game format where I, the game master, am creating content to present to players. The second problem with reactive play is that it can easily get boring. No one is saying that a classic good guy must stop bad guy plot can't be fun, but if it's the only kind of game you ever play, it will eventually get old. The authors point out that it's very common for groups that have played a lot of games to eventually want to try an evil campaign. And one of the reasons this is so exciting is that villains are proactive. They decide what kinds of wrongs they want to enact, and somebody tries to stop them. In most D&D games, this is a format that just doesn't occur when the players are the good guys. And finally, reactive gameplay limits player agency. I know this is a popular buzzword right now, but it basically just means freedom, and it's what makes tabletop games special. Unlike a video game where you are choosing from a predetermined set of options, you are supposed to have complete freedom in a tabletop game. But when all you're doing is reacting to what the game master hands you, you are inherently limited. You get to choose how you react, but not much beyond that. So what does it look like to run a game where the heroes are proactive instead of reactive? Well, for one thing, it's a lot easier on the GM. Quote, "The players provide the content and the goals, and the game master decides how to turn these goals into unforgettable encounters." The premise is startlingly simple. Players declare their goals, and you, as a game master, simply react to them. And to be clear, this is easier for the GM, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's harder for the players. In fact, this method is often a lot more fun and engaging for players, because they're way less likely to get stuck pursuing a quest or playing an encounter that they don't find fun or interesting. To quote Jeff Ashworth, author of several books in this Game Master series in the afterword, they pursue the goals they've established for themselves and are therefore delighted at each session because every encounter is built around the things that matter to them. I no longer need to worry which path they'll pursue because they, or their stated goals, tell me where they're going. Now, I recognize that this might sound kind of obvious, and maybe some of you are already running your games like this. Personally, I already knew that I wanted my players to have agency, and I wanted their characters to feel central to the plot and have a meaningful impact on the world. I already knew that player characters should have goals to motivate their adventures, and that those goals should be incorporated into the overall arc of the story. But the result was that I was working even harder to accomplish these things, and because I was still using a classic reactive game structure, all that work was only eking out a little more agency for my players. The concept laid out in this book showed me that I could achieve those goals much more effectively while also doing a lot less work. I'm gonna be honest with you, it was a huge relief. So that's basically what's in the introduction. The other 200+ pages are dedicated to providing a clear, actionable structure for how to run games like this. I'm not gonna read you the book because you can do that for yourself if you're interested, but I do want to point out a few specific things from this book that I personally have found really useful. First up, in the chapter on player character goals, there is a clear 5-step process. I've always felt very strongly about goals as part of character creation, but this list makes it super easy for players to create goals that will actually result in a fun game. The list is as follows. Number 1, each character should have multiple goals. This keeps the gameplay varied and ensures that players always have something to do, even if they've run into a roadblock with a particular goal. 2, goals should have varying time frames. Jonah and Tristan split goals into 3 categories: short-term, mid-term, and long-term. A short-term goal might be accomplished in just a few sessions, whereas a long-term goal might not be accomplished until the end of the campaign. It's important to note here that players are expected to continue to come up with new goals as the game progresses. When they accomplish a short-term goal, they'll need to come up with another one. 3, goals must be achievable. When they say achievable, what they really mean is measurable. Basically, it should be really obvious when this goal is achieved. The example they provide of an unmeasurable goal is, I want to be more powerful. A more measurable alternative would be something like the goal of winning a specific fighting tournament next year. 4, goals must have consequences for failure. Basically, if the player tries to achieve this goal and fails, they shouldn't be able to just try again. Something should change as a result of that failure. This gives the goal stakes, which makes it interesting. And finally, goals must be fun to pursue. Obviously, this is subjective, and I think the most important point here is that if a player chooses a goal and then realizes later that it isn't actually fun in gameplay, you should be willing to make changes. I've mentioned in other videos that I'm starting a new campaign right now, and I actually gave this list of conditions directly to my players to help them set their goals. This next thing isn't so much a specific resource as an overall framework that I've found really helpful with reorienting my brain around this new way of running games. The fact that a proactive campaign is being shaped around player goals instead of villain goals does not mean that PCs are the only ones with objectives. Just like in a typical campaign, it's important that your factions and NPCs have their own goals. What this book offers is a clear system to help you identify which characters actually need goals, how to choose those goals, and how to use them in gameplay. First, there's the hierarchy of NPC goals. The authors suggest that you start with factions, such as governments, guilds, and religious organizations. These factions have their own goals, and they're usually pretty easy to come up with. Governments want to keep the peace, maintain order, maybe preserve power. Religions usually want to serve the will of their deity. When a random NPC comes up in the game, be that a guard or a shopkeep or whatever, knowing what faction they are associated with gives you an immediate playbook for how they'll behave. Unless there's a narrative reason to do otherwise, NPCs can just be aligned with their factions. That means that you already have a built-in baseline for what any given NPC wants and how they will interact with the players, even if you just invented them from whole cloth in the middle of a session. From there, you can flesh out more specific NPCs as they become important to the party. But this system does not work without this caveat. No faction or NPC matters unless their goals intersect with player goals. This is one of those things that makes immediate sense when you hear it, but I've never actually heard it articulated before. Who cares if the king is trying to have the queen murdered and blame it on a neighboring kingdom in order to start a war if none of your players' goals have anything to do with the royal family, the court, the military, or the neighboring kingdom? The DM's Guide has a whole section about factions, but that section is several paragraphs explaining how to create a faction, even down to developing a motto, before it finally concludes by suggesting that you maybe consider how players might come into contact with this organization. Now that I see it, it is genuinely shocking shocking to me how much work game masters are encouraged to do on stuff that we have no reason to believe will actually matter to the game. In this book, it's made very clear that any character or faction included in the game needs a goal that either aligns with or contradicts player goals, making them either an ally or a villain, so you're not wasting your time creating factions and NPCs that your characters might happen to stumble into sometime. Last but not least, this book includes a 7-step encounter design checklist that has been a game changer for me. The key here is really the setup. Once you know your player goals and your faction and NPC goals, encounters practically write themselves. Let's put together an example encounter using this checklist. Step 1 is to review the relevant player goal. Let's say in this case the party is pursuing the wizard's goal of obtaining dragon's teeth as a spell component. Step 2 is to identify which factions have goals that overlap. For example, the dragon has been terrorizing local farms and eating their livestock, so the farmers in this area are aligned with the player's goal to kill the dragon. But there's also a dragon-worshipping cult whose goal is to gain the dragon's favor. Step 3 is the same thing, but for NPCs. Obviously, there's the dragon, whose goal is to control the nearby town through fear in order to use it as a reliable food source. Maybe there's also a cult leader and a head farmer. Step 4 is the location. This one seems pretty obvious, most likely the dragon's lair. And who else is present at that location? Well, the dragon lives there, and the cult operates out of the same cave system, so they're nearby. Step 5 is to figure out what kind of conflict you expect. Most creatures won't give up their teeth without a fight, so it's safe to assume that you'll need stat blocks for the dragon and probably the cultists. In step 6, you choose rewards. This is another obvious one, probably the dragon's teeth that they came for, but they might also receive a reward from the farmers who are grateful for their help. Or maybe they'll find something in the cultists' camp that relates to a different party goal. And step 7 is just collecting your materials, maps, minis, props, etc. And that's it! You're done! Every single decision you made while building this encounter was based on information that you already have. And if anything surprising happens while it's playing out, you're equipped for that too, because you know every single participant's goals. If the dragon offers the players a deal and they choose to betray the farmers in exchange for a tooth willingly given, then their goals are now misaligned with the farmers, and the farmers become opposition. Likewise, the cultists are in a position to become new allies. These are just a few examples of how this system both simplifies your role as a game master and makes it ridiculously easy to deliver exactly the kind of game your players want, without any guesswork. I'm sure some of you are out here already doing all this stuff, and I love that for you. But for me, reading this really opened my eyes to all the things I was sweating and laboring over that weren't even serving the game. None of the suggestions in this book require you to change anything about the mechanics of your game. All they do is redistribute the creative labor in a way that improves the game for everyone. Like, not to fawn, but I genuinely don't think there's a downside. This is not a sales pitch, so I'm not here to talk you into buying the book. It truly makes no difference to me. But if this video makes you rethink the way that you structure your campaigns, you have Jonah and Tristan Fishel to thank for it, not me. And there's a ton of great ideas in this book that I didn't even touch on in this video. So as a person who, again, has no horse in this race, if you liked this video, you will like this book, and I'll put a link to it in the description.